In a previous section, I said that the admin doesn't have to be in full control of the donated funds with no outside control. This is a key feature of our smart contract. The admin must create a spending request every time he wants to spend some money for something related to this project. That request must be voted by the contributors, and only after that the money will be released and sent to the recipient, the vendor or supplier. The spending request must contain as much information as needed by the contributors to be aware of what they vote for. For the spending request, we'll create a new state variable. We need a struct named request. You can recap about structs from a previous lecture where I've explained in detail how a struct is created and how can it be used. So we create a struct with the following fields. A string named description. This is the spending request description. A field of type address, let's say recipient. This is the account that receives the money. An uint field of type value, the value this recipient will receive. A bool field named completed. The admin will create a spending request and then the contributors will vote for that request. If more than 50% of the contributors vote in favor of this request, then the admin can finalize the request by sending the value to the recipient. At that moment, the request has been completed. So we need a Boolean variable that marks if a specific request has been completed or not. In an unsigned integer number of voters, we'll save how many contributors have voted for this request. And our struct also needs a mapping variable with keys of type address and values of type bool. This variable, this mapping variable, will register the voters. So, by default, every address has a false value associated to it. When somebody, a contributor, comes and votes for this request, we'll modify the associated false value with true. So we know that a contributor voted for this request if the corresponding value to his address is true. We've just defined a structure, but we didn't create any state variable. So I create a request dynamic array public named requests. The admin will create many spending requests for this campaign, and the contributors will vote for every spending request. This could be a very complex project or campaign. So we'll save all these requests, all these spending requests in a dynamic array of type request, where request is this struct. Only the admin can create a request. So we'll define a modifier named onlyAdmin that will be used with functions that can be called only by the admin. So onlyAdmin require msg.sender, the account that calls the function, equals admin, underline, semicolon. And now I create a function named createRequest. My function has some arguments. In fact, these arguments are the fields of my struct variable of a request. A request has a description, underline description. A request has a recipient, someone that will receive the money, and there is also a value that will be sent to that recipient. This function is public, it can be called from the outside, and now inside this function I'll create a new request. So I'll create a variable of type request named new request equals to request, and now this is how a request is initialized. If you don't remember, you can recap the struct lecture. Description. This is the struct field, colon, underline, description. This is the function argument, comma. Recipient, colon, underline, recipient. Value, colon, underline, value. These are the function arguments, and there are three. If we look again at our struct variable, we can see that there are more fields. So there is a completed Boolean field, a number of voters field, and a mapping field. These two fields must be initialized when a new struct is created. Otherwise, we'll get an error. It's not mandatory for the mapping field to be initialized. We'll modify this field when a contributor will vote for a request. So, back to our function create request. I continue writing completed colon false, by default request is not completed, and number of voters colon 0, because by default no one has voted for this request. Even if everything looks okay, there is an error. Let's see what is this error about. It says that a variable is declared as a storage pointer. Use explicit storage keyword to silence this warning. As you remember from the struct lecture, a struct variable is always saved in storage. That means that if a variable must be saved in storage, it must be declared here at contract level and not inside the function. So, in conclusion, I can't declare a struct variable inside the function. Even if I write here storage, the error is still there. What can I do? I can use the memory keyword and my error is gone. What does the memory keyword do? It instructs the EVM to create this variable in memory, so not in storage. So this keyword here is very important and it's mandatory. Now that I have a request variable, I must add this variable to my dynamic array named requests. As I said, a campaign can have more spending requests. So requests dot push, this is how we add an element to a dynamic array, new request. Okay, there is no error and everything looks just fine. There is still something we must do, and we must write here the only admin specifier. This is because we want this function to be executed, to be run only by the admin. Only the admin can create a request. So this must be here. Let's test how will the admin create a request. So the first account is the admin that deploys the contract. Okay, one remark. I didn't specify here neither the goal nor the deadline, and there is no error. This is because the goal and the deadline have been initialized with the default values of 0. If we check what is the deadline, it's the same as the current block time, and the goal is 0. Let's take a look at the constructor. If underline deadline is the default 0, then deadline equals now, and that's why we got this big value here for deadline. Let's try to create a request from another account using the second account. Description, let's say shelter. Then we have a recipient address. Let's take a random address from here and paste it here, and a value of, let's say, 60, and create request. As we can see, we got this error because we tried to create a request using another account and not the admin. Now, using the admin account, so the first account from here, I'll try to create a new request. So one more time, shelter, let's say this address, and the value of 80 this time. And the request has been created. The transaction has been executed. Now I go to my dynamic array named requests, and I want to see the element from index 0, so the first element. And we can see that the first element is this struct. So the description is shelter, the recipient address is this value, the value is 80, completed is false, and number of voters is 0. We can say that the create request function works as expected.